Let's see if this gets already age restricted because of the title. The Sadness has been causing quite some buzz this year, and already a bit at the end of last year. If I recall correctly, the directorial debut of Robert Jabez and the most brutal zombie movie ever made, at least according to the poster, is a movie that I recently watched. I've seen it already in the cinemas, and as I was in quite a bad mood recently, I revisited a couple of mostly Asian splatter movies. By the way, check out Helldriver. Upon rewatching it, I can say it's on the same level as Tokyo Gore Police and The Machine Girl. But let's return to the subject at hand, the sadness. This time I want to go a bit into depth with the movie review, so I structured it also. You can skip to the chapter of the review that you would like the most, or just watch the entire video, it's up to you. You can also skip the spoiler section. Due to the nature of the movie, I will show only scenes of the trailer and interview material. The basic plot of the movie concerns a young couple, Jim and Kat, in Taiwan. The Alvin virus is currently spreading, but the situation seems rather normal. After an argument in the morning, each one goes to their respective work, and suddenly all hell breaks loose. Jim encounters a crazy old lady in a diner, which starts horribly attacking all the customers, and he can barely escape. He tries to call Kat, but she's going through her own nightmare. An weird old man is hitting on her while she's on the subway. She rejects him, and then suddenly another man starts indiscriminately stabbing passengers in the subway. The people are shocked but manage to overwhelm him. But just when the situation seems to be under control, more people freak out and attack everyone viciously. Kat can escape with another woman, but the weird old man has also turned into a deranged maniac and is following them. The Alvin virus has mutated. The people infected turn into ruthless, sadistic maniacs. They are brutal, they are horny, and the infection is spreading rapidly. Jim is trying to get to his girlfriend, but will he reach her in time? And how will they escape?
Okay, so originally in the movie, the virus was supposed to be indicated by like profuse crying, like the infected people were supposed to be crying, and that's how you would know. And then we had all these, like I had all these ideas of like, you know, people crying because they were scared, and then people, like normal people thinking, oh no, like those people are infected too, you know, like children crying in the hospital, and then people wanting to kill the children or something. So like, but then when we started doing the movie, like I forgot that that was something we were supposed to do. And then I was like, so many of them weren't crying. And I was like, oh damn, well, we can't go back. So let's just keep going.
Meet Rob Jabez, the mastermind behind the most brutal zombie movie ever made, according to the poster. A fresh face in horror, who not only wrote and directed The Sadness, but also edited it, and has a bit of a special effects background himself. And if I may say so, he did a pretty good job doing all this stuff, at least for his feature film debut. He is a self-taught animator and has already a couple of shorts under his belt, and got the chance to direct his first feature film with The Sadness. He wasn't terribly excited to direct a zombie/infected movie about an epidemic, but the opportunity was just too good.
To make a movie right now, and then in January there'll be no movies in the theater, and we'll have no competition. So I said, okay, do you want to do the science fiction thing? He's like, no, it's got to be a pandemic thing. I'm like, really? Do people want to be hearing about that? Like, you think that people want to get their mind off it? It's like, no. Like, if you look at the numbers, like Contagion is #1 on Netflix. You know, Outbreak and all these old pandemic movies. That's what people want to be seeing. So I said, okay, so zombie. How about a zombie thing? Okay, well, I don't want to do that. It sounds boring and, you know, well-trodden ground, you know? So then I thought, okay, well, why don't we make it more like make it really crazy, and it's like, oh, how do we do that? It's like, oh, well, how about if we make it so that they enjoy it? So I started looking into some, I remember I'd read a comic book like in the late aughts. You say that in Britain, right? Aughts?
Not really, okay. But I mean, but it works. The zeros, whatever.
So in the late aughts, it was just kind of like, this is, I don't care that much about this. Like just because if you read the script, it's not that good, to be honest. It's about the sensation of it all.
Set pieces,
right?
And things, yeah.
So I was like, so I kind of knew like I can give this off to somebody and he'll screw it up. They'll read the script and they'll mistake some of the dialogue for jokes, and they'll try to do a comedy with it. Like they'll just completely misread the foundation of it. So I was kind of handing it off with like a chuckle, kind of like this will be funny. But then when it came back to me, I was like, okay, you know, how often do you get this kind of opportunity to have like carte blanche on a film that you wrote? I can be a writer-director, and I mean the budget wasn't huge, but hey, it wasn't pock and change either, you know. So we were able to like do something kind of good.
While he wasn't expected to direct the movie at first, he got that position at some point in the production too, and also edited the movie and got the final cut rights. A pretty sweet deal for a newcomer if you ask me, but he seems to be the kind of guy who works hard and gets what he wants eventually. And I say, good for you. Rob wanted to make this movie something special, which sticks out of the flood of zombie movies we had, especially in the last 15 or so years. The movie isn't just more brutal than other zombie movies, it's also not a classic Romero-style movie. You see, the zombies are infected. They are more like the 28 Days Later rather than the Walking Dead. But they also have some intelligence left. The closest thing you can describe to them, Rob also admits, are the infected in Garth Ennis' Crossed, a comic series I haven't read myself, but from which I heard a bit, and what I heard didn't sound that good, to be honest. And I am someone who loved Ennis' Punisher stories.
I read this comic book called Crossed by Garth Ennis and Jason Burrows. Yeah, and this guy's giving me a thumbs up off camera. And I was like, this is great, because what this does is it adds an element of like malice and sadism to the zombie structure, the narrative structure, I guess. And I was like, oh, but you know, I bet this is too hardcore though to make a film. Hey, the thing's been out for like more than 10 years, like 12 years or 13 years, and they haven't been able to make a movie. The reason why is just because it's too hardcore. It's too much, too sexually violent, too like mean-spirited, too much like just really fucked up stuff. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna have to tone this down a little bit, but also I'm like, maybe it's also good to kind of like you know, try to, because there's things I don't like about it.
Well, I guess we agree here. Shabazz took the comic as a basic premise, changed quite a bit and toned down the violence and assaults of a sexual nature, and made it a watchable experience. He also mixed it up with the splatter we know from Asian movies and the Evil Dead remake.
The gore was inspired by the 2013 remake of Evil Dead, because I liked how Fede Alvarez sort of balanced the reality of violence with sort of the humor of it. I just thought
as you can see in the interviews, Rob also seems to be a quite chill guy who doesn't take things too serious and just does his thing. Pretty cool. So you've waited long enough for the review part of this video, so let's get it starting. The Sadness has a very thin plot. It reminded me a bit of the game Kane & Lynch 2 in its structure. It's an almost non-stop thrill ride, just keeps going relentlessly. The story only exists to get us to the next set piece. We don't get much to know about the two main characters. There's only like an attempt to give them some character in the beginning, but after that they split for most of the movie. There are no flashbacks, no cute little thing between them, they just exist and one tries to find the other. The acting is fine, there isn't too much that requires real skill from the actors, but they do a fine job, being victims, sadists or masochists. The star here is really the splatter and messed up situations, and these are pretty effective. The splatter really reminds me of the Japanese splatter movies we got like a decade ago, and of course the Evil Dead remake. It's pretty violent and bloody, there are literally orgies of blood, showers of blood, bashed in skulls and throat cuts. The body count is also pretty high and the assaults of a sexual nature are pretty upsetting, as they should be. They are also often not shown on screen, which is good in my opinion. I remember seeing the movie in the cinema, and on my left side there were a couple of men who must have been around 40 or 50, who were talking about Lucio Fulci's Zombie before the movie started, and who pretty much loved it. and the couple in the row behind me, where the woman asked her partner right before the mayhem started if this was a zombie movie. And later on she said a couple of times that this is pretty disgusting. Well, sweetie, you should have looked at the poster before you walked into the movie. What I want to say with that is that this movie isn't for everyone. If you are someone who can enjoy the Evil Dead remake, Laid to Rest, Terrifier, Saw or the Hostel movies, then you can have fun here. It's not quite an extreme movie, but it's also not your standard horror movie. It's on the line between both, and I'm not sure if that will help the movie potentially winning over people on both sides, or if it will attract even less from both sides as it can't decide what it is. I don't know if I can say that this movie is something where you can really have fun with, as it can be upsetting, but it's a movie which entertained me quite a bit 2 times, and which I am happy I own now, because I will probably watch it again, maybe even this year on Halloween. But maybe something is just wrong with me. Maybe I was spared with the C virus and have the Elven virus myself. Let's just switch to the spoiler review, I don't want to think about that. Let's talk about some of the messed up stuff in The Sadness. Like I said, there are some quite upsetting scenes. Fortunately, those of a sexual nature are only implied. Like a young woman with braces who survives the subway attack, but has obviously turned into an infected and has her top ripped and torn. The braces indicate that she's pretty young, it's not mentioned how young, but even when she's just 18, it puts another layer of disturbing on that scene. But I don't want to talk only about the violence itself here. I also want to talk about some scenes that don't make that much sense. Like at some point it's said that all the infected turned into sadists, that they just want to cause pain and suffering, but there are a couple of scenes which show or indicate that some characters are absolute masochists or enjoy being hurt. It's also stated that the infected don't attack or hurt each other. This is already contradicted with the first kill in the movie, when an infected is run over by another infected. There's also the scene at the baseball field when some boys are torturing a man, who enjoys it pretty much. Or the probably most disturbing scene when the woman, which was saved by Kate in the subway, is later on assaulted through her eye wound by the old weird man, which isn't shown on screen, and I'm very grateful for that. And the old weirdo later says that she wouldn't want him to stop once she was infected, and this is probably true. So the rules that are laid out by the movie are not strictly followed by the movie. It's something that annoys me a bit, but maybe I'm nitpicking here. Another thing that was a bit distracting was the comedy. While the comedy could be funny, in the cinema I smiled at least once, it feels kind of out of place. Maybe because it is mostly pretty serious and is sometimes right after an upsetting scene. The woman on the train, for example, gets her eye picked out and flees with Kate through the subway tunnels, when they bump into a strong guy who asks if they have no eyes in their heads, only to realize that one of them has lost an eye. Another scene is taking place during a news segment, which is watched by a couple of people in a hospital. During the news, the Prime Minister and the General speak to the population. The General has obviously turned into an infected and is getting more and more unhinged, until he grabs the Prime Minister and shoves a grenade into his mouth and lets him explode facing the camera. One of the viewers in the hospital then says something like, "What kind of headless show was that?" It's honestly the funniest scene in the movie and could have been almost something out of Tokyo Gore Police, but it just feels so out of place. Rob seems to have a weird sense of humor, which I actually like, but it just doesn't fit here.
Terrible. Swiss mosquitoes are the worst. They're the worst.
Oh well.
They're very indiscriminate, you know, because they're neutral. But yeah, thanks. Anyways, I just came up with that just now.
Very good.
See, this is why I get paid why I get paid the big bucks. Anyway.
The last point I want to mention is a thing that I don't like in most violent horror movies, which pretty often occurs. There are scenes in which people are getting harmed or killed only because they act stupid. I tried to explain it in my Aftershock review, but here something similar happens a couple of times as well. Let's take the scene in the hospital. When the crazies storm the entrance, there is police, they are armed and they just react stupid, not engaging with any of the threats that is present, not shooting at the attackers, and that there is a crowd inside which escalates also feels like something that is forced by the script. There's also the scene I mentioned earlier, when they bump into the strong guy. He gets completely wrecked by the weird old man, which doesn't make sense. The guy looks like he could be a bodybuilder and gets killed by a weird old man who isn't that big or strong. The ending also feels a bit stupid and forced with the scientist who injects Kate with the virus while the situation is already out of control. And he progressively makes the situation worse. But with all that said, I think I can go over to the verdict. The Sadness is no masterpiece by any means, but it's also not terrible. It doesn't break new ground or tells the story perfectly, but it also doesn't have to, and it seems like everyone involved knew that. The script has some obvious flaws, but the directing is really solid, the effects are very cool, it looks like a movie that had an appropriate budget, and it's dirty, violent entertainment for adults. A roller coaster ride for everyone who dares to dive into darker splatter movies. I don't know if this is the most brutal zombie movie ever made, there are some pretty rough movies, and of course it depends on the person. I can surely say it's not the bloodiest zombie movie, that will probably forever be Peter Jackson's Brain Dead. But the more realistic violence and scenes of SA are another form of brutality that The Sadness has to offer, but it's a hell of a tagline for the movie poster. With that said, I will give The Sadness a 7 out of 10. Thanks for watching the video to the end. I hope you enjoyed it. You can leave a sub and a thumbs up if you like it, or a thumbs down if you didn't. You can also follow me on Letterboxd if you like. My username is notimportant93 and I will leave all the info in the description.